Well, in this episode, I'm going to discuss how you can delegate authority, but you cannot delegate responsibility.
But you cannot delegate responsibility. So no matter what happens in whatever it is that you're responsible for, whatever leadership position you have, it's still your responsibility no matter what happens.
Welcome back to our channel. We're all about picking ourselves back up from a fall, and this time, making the success that we want to make. Thanks for joining in with us. Today, we have another good story for you today to help you bounce back to success. Now, in our last episode, we discussed how failure is never final. And if you remain prepared for success, it can still happen, as we were all pleasantly surprised to find out. Well, in this episode, I'm going to discuss how you can delegate authority, but you cannot delegate responsibility. More about that in just a moment. Let's bring on our shining co-host. Hi, Max. How are you today?
I'm good, Tony. How you doing?
I'm having a good day. Thanks for hopping on and joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
I'm very excited about this, and I have some questions on it that aren't in the book, but first of all, for our audience here, we're going to talk about Chapter 7, which the title is It Was Cadet Bonehead. That's the title of the chapter, yeah. And in that chapter, Max, you talk about, well, you got seriously busted for something that just wasn't your fault. At least, in my opinion, it wasn't your fault. And it starts off really sad. I mean, it was sad. And I guess I'm going to leave it there for you to pick up. Can you tell us what happened there?
Sure. Let me give you a preface, if I might, to that. When I was at the academy, I was the editor of the Cadet magazine, which had about a 5,000, I guess, subscriber base, and mainly for cadets, but also for parents and other interested people. And so in one section of the magazine, there were 2 pages of jokes and cartoons. And I got a lot of them from Texas A&M back in those days. They said, sure, take all our jokes you want and republish them. So it was a great deal. I had been on the Talon staff, the name of the magazine, Talon, for quite some time. And so we had a load of magazines come in, and the then commandant of cadets decided he would drop down to the loading dock and get a preview of these magazines before they were sent out. He did so. The next thing I knew, I got a call and said, 3 of those jokes are not acceptable, and therefore you will not be able to send out this magazine. So then the editor, or the publisher of the magazine up in Denver, Colorado, called and said, Max, what do you want to do? I mean, we can't republish this magazine. You don't have it in your cadet budget. So what do you want to do? And I said, no, give me some time. So I thought about it and thought, if we could just eliminate those 3 little jokes, which, by the way, were not offensive. I had taken them from Texas A&M. If we could just eliminate those, then we could put the magazine. Well, how am I going to eliminate those? I can't cut them out because then that messes up the other side of the page. I can't do this. I can't. So finally, I said, you know what? If I could get rolls of black tape and cut out each one of for the magazines, so put my whole staff together and we cut out exactly what would fit over those 3 magazines. Okay. Took us like 2 days, the whole staff, all the time cutting. We got it done and I sent them out. I didn't ask permission and I got away with it. I'm sure the commandant, a 1-star general, was highly incensed that I had beat him on this one. I got the magazine. Okay. So that was the first real instance where I had to deal with the commandant of cadets, fortunately. Okay, so now what happens? I get a knock on my dormitory door one morning after Reveille. We had all assembled, and it was the squadron air officer commanding, a Marine major that was responsible in the real Air Force, not just the cadets, in overseeing our operation, helping us learn things and so forth. and he is dressed, spit shines, polished, everything, that Marine uniform. And he didn't want to be at the Air Force. He thought it was ruining his career. He wanted to be back in the Marine Corps. Tough guy. And he says, bam, Mr. James, do you know what's going on in your squadron? And I said, yes, sir. And I gave him the 3 S's. I won't tell you what they all 3 stand for, but nevertheless, Marine did. And he says, follow me. And so the next thing I know, I'm going down the hallway in the squadron with my bathrobe on, right? Not a good idea. And we stop in front of one of the alcoves going into the cadet's room. And there is cadet fourth class, a dually, they were called, standing in full Class A uniform, hat, and a rifle, sweating like crazy. It's just soaked. And the Marine says, cadet fourth class, what are you doing? Sir, I have been doing rifle push-ups. Oh, shoot, here it comes. Uh-oh. Okay. No exercise, physical exercise is 30 minutes before breakfast, before a meal. Strike one. And he said, and what kind of physical exercises have you been doing? Sir, I've been doing rifle push-ups. Strike two. Rifle push-ups are where you put the rifle on edge, you grab it like this, and you do push-ups. And as you start to tremble, it's easy for you to roll over. Your wrist give way and break a knuckle finger. So those were outlawed. That was strike two. Strike two. He says, and who gave you those physical punishments? Sir, cadet third class Bonehead. All right, that's not his real name, obviously, but Bonehead. He said, and where is Cadet Bonehead? Sir, I do not know. Strike three. All physical punishments had to be supervised. So the Marine reaches over, opens the door, and there's Bonehead laying on top of his bed, snoring. Okay. So the Marine turns to me and gives his big Marine smile, and he said, Mr. James, I think we'll probably be seeing you a little later today.
Uh-oh.
Post. Oh, my gosh. So I go back, I finish shaving, I put on my uniform, I march my squadron to breakfast, come back, get my books, and go to the first class of the day. I'm sitting in class and, this is probably not going to be a good day. Well, before I went to the class, or before I went up to see the commandant, because he knocked on the door in my office, his assistant said, you need to stop and see Lieutenant Colonel Ashmore, the group AOC. And I'm thinking, it's just getting worse and worse. So I go into the office and he said, sit down, James. And I did. And he said, I want to tell you a story. First of all, the general's in a bad mood today, so this is not going to be pleasant when you get up to his office. He said, when I was in combat in World War II, I was a squadron commander. And they sent me over a couple of new pilots, green behind the ear pilots. And they were good. They were really good. We went on combat missions and they did an outstanding job. We came back from one and they stayed in the air in practice, air-to-air combat. He said, well, we didn't have the extra fuel for that. We didn't have parts. So I got them on the ground. He said, I chewed them up one side and down the other. Just chewed them and said, do not do that again. And here's one. They said, fine. And they went on and we flew more missions. And one day they came back. Tony, they did it again. Uh-oh. They did it again. They went up and practiced air-to-air. This time, however, they had an air-to-air crash.
Oh, no.
They had a midair, and both planes came down, both planes ruined, both pilots killed. Lieutenant Colonel says, the result of that, they were my squadron, my responsibility. He said, I was sent back to the Pentagon, never to fly combat again. And that's why I have this little silver oak leaf on my shoulder instead of maybe a star. So he said, James, remember this. You can delegate authority, but the responsibility is always yours. Now go see the general. Oh, so I go to see the general, and it is just everything you can imagine bad. He yelled and screamed and had me standing at attention with my chin run in and all of that stuff. And he said, you've lost total control of your squadron. You obviously don't know what's going on in there. Your men do this. Physical punishments outlawed. He said, so you're busted from cadet colonel down to cadet first class. Turn in your saber, take a rifle, march at the back of your squadron, the last man in the squadron, And he said, and we're going to move you out of the squadron, move you to an isolated area in the dormitory, and you'll be living there. You've lost all your privileges, all your things that you've been awarded for, all lost. So I go back down and I see the colonel. He said, well, I told you it wasn't going to be bad. He said, I'll do what I can, but remember what I told you. You can delegate authority, but you cannot delegate responsibility. So, no matter what happens in whatever it is that you're responsible for, whatever leadership position you have, it's still your responsibility no matter what happens. And we've seen that a lot of times in civilian life and so forth. So, anyway, I did. I moved out. I marched to the back of the squadron, but the lieutenant colonel was a good guy. He'd been there, right? And so, before this was my last semester here at the Air Force Academy, I got all of my privileges back. I didn't get my rank, but I got all my privileges back. And so all I had to do from the time this happened until graduation was study, pass, and then graduate. And then the real gift to show you what a great guy this was, he put me back with my rank and put me back on first group staff. And so I marched and got all my rewards, and my parents and family were there as though nothing had happened. You can delegate authority. You cannot delegate responsibility. Number one lesson I learned in the 4 years I was at the Air Force Academy.
That's an amazing story. And when I read that, I always wondered, Max,
Yes.
what happened to Cadet Bonehead in all of this? Did you go chase him down? What?
No, he was written up by the major, and writing up means you had to march a certain number of hours of tours, which is the most boring and waste of time, right? And so that's why you had to do it. But he was punished for those things. But if it'd been up to me, he would have been home by that. By the end of the day, he would have been kicked out. Are you getting me busted?
I'm sure he avoided you every time he saw you, if it were possible.
I just was at my 60th class reunion, and I asked somebody if they remembered Cadet Bonehead, and they said they did. And they told me a little bit about what a great officer he had become. Yeah, which is great. Maybe he learned the lesson too, huh?
Well, that's good. I guess all's well that ends well, but just
Yes,
what
sir.
a hard lesson, especially the two fighter pilots that were doing dogfights.
Yeah.
That's a brutal way to learn a lesson.
Well, I've taken that lesson and I've applied it in all the companies that I've started and in my personal life and in family and everything, reminding people that they can't turn their back. They can't sit in the office all day long. They need to be out in the field determining what's going on because it's their responsibility to do so.
Now, as you cannot delegate responsibility, do you have any uh, um, some pointers, some advice on how to bring that up in people? How do you do that? I mean, you don't want a disaster. How do you get people to take more responsibility when they should?
Well, first of all, you tell them that story. Okay.
Okay.
And that helps before you then try to do just what you suggested, Tony, and that is point out how not taking responsibility can end up. Let's use a war example. Let's say you're flying an airplane, and you have the responsibility of navigation, and that responsibility goes down. What's a pilot going to do? Okay, I mean you can kill you both because you don't take the responsibility for being the navigator. Same things happens in the business world and in people's private lives. Okay, you are responsible for your children's activities. You're responsible for family gatherings. In my opinion, you're responsible for supporting your family and seeing that they do the best that they can. So there are just tons of examples that occur on a daily basis. And if you think about this as you go through a day, or if you're worried about something not going right in your organization, whatever organization type it might be, then you think, that's my responsibility. He's not performing well. That's my responsibility to do what I can to help him or her perform better. It's your responsibility to achieve the goals of the entity, whatever it is, and the people in it for all time.
Those are good points. I really like that. Back in the day, I've been in corporate, what I call corporate America, for like
Sure.
30 years. And early on, and I never really thought about this until we did this interview, early on, the CEO, the executive, they had different names at different times, would would walk around the company, see what's going on in the various divisions, departments, and so forth. Perhaps maybe on a weekly basis, but or periodically, there would be that engagement. The head honcho, the blue cheese, there were very many
Right.
names for them back then, would
Right.
come around and see what's going on, and that would get you to increase your responsibility of being control, because and I think it came from the top because the person in charge. Well, over the decades and today, the one of the last companies I worked at, the CEO never walked around. When he came in, he would go in his office, be in his office, and then leave. It was just like isolated. And I think of that in relation to this interview of how that kind of pulls back on the responsibility, just because if the CEO doesn't care and isn't walking around seeing what's going on, you can get a little bit of lackadaisical as well at your job, at your position. And I think that's part of it. You mentioned that going out and around. I think that's one key factor in growing some responsibility. Getting people
We
to do more.
Yeah. We hear often that leadership, you need to have an open door policy so people can come and talk to you. That's not enough. Sitting in your office and waiting for somebody to come tell you something that's going wrong or right, even, is not enough. There's a book out, and in there, they talk about walking the manufacturing floor. In other words, think of a building and it's 2-story, and the CEO or whatever has windows, and he can look out and down on the manufacturing floor. Book proves the point. That's not good enough. You have to walk the manufacturing floor to find out what's really going on in your organization. Why? Because it's your responsibility. That's the point we're trying to make here. Yeah.
I like that. Some good points here. And to our audience, I just want to say thanks for hanging out with us today. And this is the book we're talking about: The Harder I Fall, The Higher I Bounce. And if you look down in the description, you'll be able to see it. Pick it up on Amazon and other places. It's a great read. And I love it. I love it for multiple reasons. But one is you get to see how things were a couple of decades ago, or yesteryear, the old days or whatever. Very interesting on how people interacted, how things went. I really love the older stories, if I can say it that way. Not too much to date you, but it's just always good to say this is how they did it back then. These are great stuff. So I recommend this. And if you have a story about delegating responsibility or bouncing back, please tell us. And if you like this podcast, we appreciate if you can give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. And we have another episode coming up, and we just want to say thank you all very much. Max, thanks for coming on with us.
Thank you, Tony. See you soon.